This is The Bottom Line. The Bottom Line on 938 Live.
An annual meeting of global central bankers in Jackson Hole, Wyoming has ended, and the U.S. labor market was again in the spotlight. U.S. Fed Chair Janet Yellen said that she's still concerned about the weaknesses in the jobs market, despite the main unemployment rate falling to 6.2% currently, down from a post-recession peak of 10%. During the meeting, there were also talks of more stimulus for Europe and Japan, as inflation in those regions falls short of targets. For an analysis of the symposium, Travis Teo spoke to Leong Wai Ho, regional economist at Barclays, and he started by asking if there is enough clarity in the jobs market for the Fed to know when to act on interest rates.
I think there will never be absolute clarity, but every month that goes by, it's clearer and clearer to the Fed that a modest improvement in the job market is underway, and that we should be drawing really closer to withdrawing accommodation, but albeit gradually.
Right. So do you think that Fed Chair Ms. Yellen will hike interest rates late next year rather than earlier?
Yes, there are two dimensions to consider with any tightening cycle, and that's timing and pace. In terms of timing, I think the Fed will probably prefer to start early, but only because it expects the pace of tightening to be more gradual than in the past. So we've forecasted the first rate hike to begin in June, somewhat earlier, but we caution that the earlier start doesn't mean that the Fed is more hawkish than in the past. Quite the reverse. It's actually dovish.
Now, also in Jackson Hole, the European Central Bank President Mario Draghi, he seemed to be testing the ground for a future bond buying program, which is also known as quantitative easing. So how likely do you think the ECB will deploy fresh stimulus?
Yes, I think it's a sign that the ECB has signaled that it will do all it takes to avert a Japan-style deflationary spiral. And it is contemplating now to start US-style asset expansion, like a bond purchase program. And this was different from what it was doing earlier, which was to expand liabilities via the LTROs. So yes, a fresh approach to stimulus is very likely.
To what extent does Europe need such a boost in their economy?
Well, the problems in Europe are actually bigger. So Europe needs, for example, to break a crisis of confidence and persistent fears of deflation. And the aging population, as well as the problems in southern Europe, don't make it any easier for the economy to respond to stimulus measures. So it is taking longer, and it will potentially take larger and larger doses of medicine before this patient shows any sign of vitality.
Bringing it back into the region, what does this Jackson Hole meeting mean to Asian businesses here?
On the whole, if it's more gradual tightening in the US, it means that we shouldn't rush in and expect a stronger US dollar all of a sudden. Dollar strength will come, but gradually. I think it also means that the dollar bloc appreciates against most of the G10 currencies like the euro and the yen. But then again, it may not appreciate too much against currencies of more dynamic economies like Asia. So against the Korean won and the Sing dollar and the Malay ringgit, it will probably struggle a bit.
Does that mean going forward there will be those businesses with exports to US will benefit then?
Well, I think it means it probably will grind slightly stronger against the Sing, but it's not going to be a very rapid move. And I think companies in this part of the world need to rethink their hedging strategies.
And that was regional economist at Barclays Leong Wai Ho on The Bottom Line.